Nandi sat by the window of her small room in Abaddon, staring at the cream-colored card in her hand. The golden letters shimmered under the light, an invitation to Ao's party. Ao was her colleague at work, always cheerful, always surrounded by people who seemed richer, louder, and brighter than she could ever be. The invitation felt like both a gift and a burden. Her heart raced as she thought about it. Everyone at the office would be there, dressed in expensive gowns and shoes she could never afford. She imagined herself standing among them in her simple clothes, sticking out like a sore thumb. The thought made her stomach tighten. She whispered to herself, "Maybe I shouldn't go." Her aunt, who raised her since childhood, walked in quietly and saw the worry on her face. Without asking, she sat beside her and placed a gentle hand on hers. "You're thinking of not going, right?" she said softly. Nandi sighed, her voice barely audible. "I don't have the kind of clothes they wear. They'll laugh at me." Her aunt smiled, a knowing smile that carried years of wisdom and struggle. She stood up and went to her chest of drawers, pulling out a folded ankara. It was bright, patterned, and stitched with care. "Wear this," she said. "It may not be from a big store, but it carries love, tradition, and strength. That's worth more than gold." Nandi held the dress close, torn between fear and hope. Something inside her began to shift. Nandi's hands trembled as she pushed open the grand doors of the hall. Music floated out, mixed with laughter and the clinking of glasses. The room glowed with soft golden lights, and everywhere she turned, she saw people dressed like royalty. Women in glittering gowns that sparkled under the chandeliers, men in perfectly tailored suits, their shoes polished so bright they could almost be mirrors. Jewelry glistened on wrists and necks, diamonds catching every bit of light. Nandi stepped in slowly, clutching her small bag tightly against her chest. Her ankara dress, though carefully stitched and colorful, felt suddenly out of place in this sea of designer labels. She felt the weight of eyes turning toward her. A hush fell for a moment, then whispers began to spread like fire. Heads tilted, lips curved into smirks. She heard giggles, then muffled laughter that was not muffled enough. "Look at her dress," someone whispered. "Who even wears that here?" another voice added. Nandi's throat went dry. She kept walking, her steps small and uncertain, wishing she could melt into the floor. The voices grew sharper, crueler, as if each word was meant to slice through her. She tried to keep her head up, but her body betrayed her, shoulders curling inward. Then came the loudest laugh of all. Amara, Ao's glamorous girlfriend, stood near the center of the room in a silver gown that shimmered like water. She threw her head back dramatically, her laughter echoing through the hall. "Oh my God," she shouted so everyone could hear. "Who invited this village girl?" The crowd erupted. Some laughed openly, others tried to hide their amusement behind glasses of wine, but their eyes betrayed them. Ao, standing awkwardly beside Amara, shifted uncomfortably, but he said nothing. The silence from him hurt almost as much as the laughter. Nandi felt the words sting her chest. "Village girl." It rang in her ears, louder than the music, louder than the laughter. For a moment she wanted to turn back, to run out into the night and never look back. But her aunt's voice whispered in her mind, "This dress carries love, tradition, and strength." She tightened her grip on her bag, forcing herself to take another step forward. The lights felt harsher, the air heavier, but she walked on. Every laugh, every whisper followed her like shadows, but she tried to steady her breathing. She reminded herself she belonged here, even if the room was trying to convince her otherwise. Still, her heart ached. She had imagined this moment so many times, maybe being invisible, maybe blending in quietly. She never thought she would be the joke of the night. The shame burned her cheeks, yet beneath it all, there was a flicker of something else, a small, stubborn flame that refused to die. Something told her the night was not over yet. The laughter had not even died down when Nandi noticed flashes of light. At first, she thought it was just the party photographers, but soon she realized people were pointing their phones at her. Some zoomed in on her dress, others angled their cameras to capture her face, her shoes, the way she clutched her bag. The sound of camera clicks and bursts of laughter made her heart pound harder. Within seconds, the whispers turned into open conversations. "This will trend tonight," one girl said, grinning as she typed quickly on her phone. Another boy laughed, tilting his phone to show his friends a picture he had just taken. They huddled around, giggling as if she couldn't see them. The glow of their screens lit up their faces, but Nandi knew those same screens were spreading her image beyond the room. She caught fragments of captions being read aloud. "Local girl crashes elite party. Ankara in the wrong place. Village chic? No thanks." Each word cut deeper than the last. She imagined strangers scrolling on their phones, laughing at her from miles away. The humiliation was no longer trapped in the four walls of the hall. It was out there in the world, multiplying with every share, every cruel comment. Nandi's chest tightened. Her vision blurred as tears pooled in her eyes, but she forced herself to blink them away. She remembered her aunt's gentle voice. "Your worth isn't in clothes." She repeated it silently, over and over, like a prayer. Your worth isn't in clothes. Your worth isn't in clothes. She moved slowly, trying not to draw more attention, and found a small empty chair in a dark corner of the hall. The music was still loud, people were still laughing and dancing, but to her, it all felt distant, like echoes from another world. She sat down quietly, pressing her back against the wall, wishing she could disappear into it. Her hands trembled as she placed them on her lap, trying to steady herself. She could feel her phone buzzing in her bag, probably messages from people who had already seen the posts. She didn't have the courage to look. She didn't need to. The laughter around her told her, and for a moment she lowered her head, fighting back the tears that now stung her eyes. She wanted to cry, to let it all out, but she knew that if she did, it would only give them more to laugh about. So she held it in, swallowing the pain, forcing her face to stay calm even when her heart was breaking. In that corner, Nandi felt small, invisible, and yet painfully exposed at the same time. But beneath the hurt, deep inside, there was still the faint echo of her aunt's word. She clung to it desperately, like a lifeline in a storm. The music paused for a moment as the tall doors opened again. Heads turned, and the whispers quickly shifted. A man walked in with quiet confidence, not dressed in glitter or covered in gold, but in a neat dark suit with a colorful African tie that stood out in its simplicity. He was introduced as Mr. Kamau, a well-known investor from Nairobi. The crowd lit up instantly. People rushed forward, eager to greet him, shake his hand, and pull him into their circles. But Mr. Kamau didn't seem interested in the crowd of shiny gowns and sparkling jewelry. His sharp eyes scanned the room as though searching for something, or someone. Then, to everyone's surprise, his gaze stopped at the far corner where Nandi sat, half hidden in the shadows. She froze when she realized he was looking directly at her. Her first instinct was to glance behind her, thinking maybe someone else was there. But no. Mr. Kamau smiled warmly, excused himself from the eager hands tugging at him, and walked straight across the hall, past the glittering crowd, past Amara's shocked face, past the whispers that quickly filled the air again. When he reached Nandi, he stopped, looked at her dress, and said in a clear, admiring voice, "That is a beautiful outfit." The hall went silent. Nandi blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Her heart raced. No one had ever complimented her dress that night, only mocked it. And now, this important guest, this man everyone wanted to impress, had walked past them all just to speak to her. "Your Ankara," Mr. Kamau continued, "is striking. This is real Africa. This is authenticity. Everywhere I go, I see people trying to copy this style, but they can never match the soul in the fabric." Nandi's lips parted, but no words came out. She could only nod slightly, overwhelmed by the sudden kindness. Her hands trembled in her lap, and she gripped the edge of her chair to stop them from shaking. The whispers began again, but this time they were filled with shock instead of mockery. "Why her?" someone muttered. Amara's smile had vanished completely, replaced by a bitter frown. Mr. Kamau wasn't bothered by the restless crowd. He pulled out a seat and sat across from Nandi, speaking to her as if they were the only two people in the room. "You should be proud," he said. "Authentic African fabrics are gaining recognition all over the world. People in Europe, America, even Asia, are craving this. They don't want machine-made fashion anymore. They want stories. They want culture. They want pieces like the one you're wearing tonight." For the first time that evening, Nandi felt her chest loosen, the heaviness lifting. Her aunt's words echoed again. "Your worth isn't in clothes." And now, a powerful stranger had confirmed it in front of everyone. Mr. Kamau's eyes lingered on the bright patterns of Nandi's Ankara dress. After a moment, he leaned forward slightly and asked, "Tell me, did you make this yourself?" The question caught her off guard. Her mouth went dry, and she fumbled for words. No, not exactly," she said softly. "My aunt stitched it. She's very good with her hands. I only helped with the design." Her voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the music in the background. But Mr. Kamau listened closely, nodding with genuine interest. "So you had a hand in bringing this to life," he pressed gently. "Yes," Nandi admitted, her cheeks warming. "I suggested the style, the cut, the way the fabric should fall. My aunt did the sewing, but we worked on it together." There was no trace of shame in his expression. Instead, his face lit up as though she had just told him the most exciting news of the evening. "That's wonderful," he said. "Do you know how rare this is? To see such originality, such authenticity? Most people here are wearing clothes imported from Europe or America, but you," he gestured at her outfit, "you're carrying Africa itself." The crowd around them grew restless. People pretended not to listen, but their ears were sharp, catching every word. Amara shifted uncomfortably, her eyes burning with jealousy. Mr. Kamau reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek black card with his name embossed in gold. He handed it to Nandi with a steady smile. "I would like to stay in touch with you," he said. "I've been searching for authentic African designs for my luxury line. We are expanding into new markets, And I want pieces that tell a story, pieces with soul. What you and your aunt are doing, it's exactly what the world is waiting for. Nandi stared at the card in her hand, her fingers trembling slightly. She couldn't believe what was happening. A few minutes ago, she had been hiding in the corner, humiliated. Now, a respected investor was offering her an opportunity she had never even dreamed of. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say yes, Mr. Kamau replied warmly. Say you will keep creating. That's all I ask. A small, uncertain smile broke across her face. She nodded. Yes. In that moment, the room seemed to shift. The same people who had laughed at her were now staring in silence, some with open mouths, others with forced smiles. They had mocked her dress, but now that same dress had drawn the attention of the most important guest of the night. Nandi felt a spark flicker inside her, a tiny flame of hope, of possibility. She didn't know exactly where this path would lead, but she knew one thing. This was the beginning of something bigger than she had ever imagined. The hall was no longer filled with laughter. The same voices that had mocked Nandi only moments ago were now hushed, their eyes glued to her as she sat across from Mr. Kamau. It was as if the air itself had shifted. The same Ankara dress they had ridiculed was now the center of admiration, and no one dared to laugh any. People whispered, but the tone had changed. Curiosity replaced cruelty. Envy replaced mockery. Guests craned their necks to catch a glimpse of the black card Mr. Kamau had placed in Nandi's trembling hand. They had all been desperate to impress him, but he had walked right past their diamonds and designer suits to sit with the girl they called Village. Amara stood stiffly near the middle of the room, her silver gown glittering under the lights, but her face was dark with frustration. Her earlier laughter seemed foolish now. She crossed her arms tightly, her lips pressed together as she watched Mr. Kamau smile warmly at Nandi. Every compliment he gave to the Ankara design felt like a dagger to her pride. Why her? Amara muttered under her breath, loud enough for a few people nearby to hear. But no one joined her this time. No one laughed along. They only watched silently, afraid of looking small if they spoke against Nandi now. Ao, caught between his girlfriend and his colleague, shifted uneasily. He tried to smile, but it was weak and nervous. He had done nothing when Amara mocked Nandi, and now he seemed to regret it. His silence made the contrast even clearer. The woman they all belittled was leaving the night with more honor than any of them. Nandi sat quietly, her hands still wrapped around Mr. Kamau's card. Inside, her heart was still pounding, but it was no longer from shame. It was from possibility, from pride she hadn't known she could feel. She thought of her aunt, of the loving hands that stitched the Ankara fabric, of the soft words that reminded her she was more than clothes. For the first time that evening, she believed it fully. When Mr. Kamau rose to continue his rounds, he gave Nandi a nod of respect before walking away. That small gesture, so public and undeniable, was enough to silence any last whispers in the room. Nandi stood too, smoothing the folds of her dress with calm hand. She didn't rush or stumble. She walked toward the exit slowly, with her head high and her steps steady. The same crowd that had laughed at her earlier now parted to let her pass. Their eyes followed her, some wide with disbelief, others heavy with regret. Amara's bitter stare burned into her back, but Nandi didn't look at her. She didn't need to. She knew the tables had turned. What was once humiliation had become dignity. By the time she stepped out of the hall, Nandi was no longer the quiet girl afraid of being mocked. She was something new, someone who had found her confidence, blooming right in the middle of her pain. The next morning, Nandi sat at the wooden table in her aunt's small sewing room. Rolls of fabric were stacked neatly in the corner, though most were scraps they had saved for months. The air smelled of thread, cloth, and hope. Her aunt adjusted her glasses and spread a fresh piece of Ankara on the table. "We'll start here," she said firmly, her hands already moving with confidence. Nandi watched her aunt for a moment before joining her. She pulled out her sketchbook, flipping through pages filled with ideas she had kept hidden for years. Designs she thought no one would ever care about. Now those sketches felt alive. "Do you think we can really do this?" she asked quietly. Her aunt looked up and smiled. "We've already started. One dress made them laugh, another can make them listen. Let's keep sewing until they can't ignore us." The work wasn't easy. They didn't have fancy machines or expensive fabric. Many nights, they used lantern light when electricity failed. They patched mistakes by hand, working until their fingers ached. Sometimes Nandi felt discouraged when she compared their small room to the glossy boutiques in Lagos. But then she would remember the way Mr. Kamau had looked at her dress, not with pity, but with admiration. That memory kept her moving forward. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, their little room filled with more dresses, skirts, and blouses. Each piece carried not just fabric and thread but love, patience, and culture. Neighbors passing by would stop to peek through the window. "These are beautiful," they would say. Nandi felt shy at first, but pride began to grow in her chest. One evening, after hours of sewing, Nandi's phone buzzed. She wiped her tired hands on her skirt before answering. On the other end was Mr. Kamau's assistant. The voice was polite but direct. Mr. Kamau has spoken highly of your work. We'd like to place a first order for his company. Nandi froze. She looked at her aunt, her mouth open in disbelief. An order, she whispered. Her aunt stopped stitching, staring at her with wide eyes. From his company? Yes, the voice confirmed. A small collection to start with. Authentic African fashion. He believes in your designs. Nandi's eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth with her hand, shaking as she tried to take in the words. The humiliation she had suffered, the whispers, the laughter, all of it seemed far away now. From that same night of shame had come an opportunity she could never have imagined. When she ended the call, she collapsed into her aunt's arms, laughing and crying at the same time. Her aunt hugged her tightly, whispering, "Didn't I tell you? Your worth isn't in clothes, it's in what you create with them." That night, even with sore hands and tired eyes, Nandi felt stronger than ever. The journey was only beginning, but the spark had already become a flame. Months passed, and the tiny sewing room in her aunt's house became the birthplace of something far bigger than either of them imagined. With every new order, with every late night spent sketching and stitching, Nandi's confidence grew. Soon, Mr. Kamau's first collection was released, and the response was overwhelming. Fashion magazines in Nairobi and Lagos began to talk about it. They called the designs fresh, authentic, and the future of African luxury. When it was time to launch her own brand, Nandi chose the name Ankara Queen. The name carried her story, rooted in tradition but crowned with dignity. The launch event in Lagos was small at first, but people came in droves. Social media lit up with pictures of bold prints, bright colors, and unique cuts. Then came Nairobi, where crowds lined up just to see her collection in person. Within weeks, influencers began posting photos of themselves in Ankara Queen outfit. One popular actress wore a flowing gown of Nandi's design to a movie premiere, and the image went viral. A singer in Nairobi performed on stage wearing one of her skirts, and fans demanded to know where it came from. Orders started flooding in from across Africa and even overseas. Nandi's phone buzzed nonstop. Emails poured in with subject lines like collaboration request and partnership proposal. Some of the names in her inbox made her sit down in shock. People she had once admired from a distance were now reaching out to her. And then, almost like a scene from a story, the people who had mocked her that night at Ayo's party began to resurface. They commented on her posts with heart emojis and fake congratulations. They sent messages asking if she would design something. One even wrote, "We always knew you'd be great." Nandi read those words and smiled quietly, remembering the laughter that once stung her. Now their envy had turned into admiration, or at least the appearance of it. Amara, the one who had called her a village girl, tried too. She sent a message through a mutual friend, asking if Nandi would consider creating a custom dress for her next event. Nandi didn't reply. She didn't need to. Silence was enough. Through it all, her aunt remained by her side. She never let the fame or attention distract them from the work. "The world may clap for you today," she reminded Nandi, "but tomorrow you must still sew with the same love." And Nandi carried those words in her heart, even as the brand exploded. From humiliation to headline, from whispers of mockery to shouts of applause, Nandi's journey had taken a turn no one could have predicted. The girl once hidden in the corner was now standing tall, her designs worn by queens of music, film, and fashion. And this was only the beginning. The hall glittered with light once again, but this time Nandi walked through its doors with a very different heart. Months of hard work, sleepless nights, and bold faith had brought her here. She wasn't the shy girl clutching her bag in fear anymore. She was the founder of Ankara Queen, a name that had spread across cities like wildfire. Tonight, she wore her own signature design, a gown of rich Ankara fabric, stitched with grace, every fold speaking of heritage and pride. The colors glowed under the chandeliers, and her presence seemed to command the entire room. As soon as she stepped in, silence fell for a beat, then came the whispers, but not the cruel ones she remembered. This time it was awe. People turned their heads, gasped softly, and began to clap. The applause spread quickly, rolling across the hall like a wave. Phones lifted into the air, not to mock, but to capture her beauty, her confidence, her arrival. Nandi's heart swelled, but her steps were steady. She walked as though she had always belonged here, her chin lifted, her smile calm yet powerful. Then she saw her, Amara, dressed in a gown that looked suspiciously familiar. It was an imitation of Ankara Queen, but the cut was off, the fabric cheaper, the stitching clumsy. Amara smiled too brightly as if trying to hold on to her old glory, but the contrast was painful. Where Nandi shone with authenticity, Amara looked like a shadow. The crowd noticed it instantly. Some exchanged knowing looks. Others whispered, "That's a fake. Nandi's is the real deal." A few even laughed quietly, but not at Nandi this time, at Amara, who now stood in the very position she once forced Nandi into. Nandi didn't stop or stare. She only glanced once, her eyes calm, before turning her gaze back to the crowd that now adored her. That small, effortless look was enough. It said everything Amara feared. The tables had turned completely. People rushed forward to greet Nandi, pulling her toward the center of the room. Celebrities hugged her. Influencers asked for photos. Designers whispered about collaborations. Amara was left standing at the edge, her fake gown clinging awkwardly as she watched the applause, the flashing cameras, the admiration, all of it belonging to the girl she once called a village girl. Nandi remembered that first night of humiliation, the whispers, the cruel laughter. Now she stood in the same kind of hall, but the sound filling the air was applause, not mockery. Her aunt's words echoed in her heart again. Your worth isn't in clothes. And tonight proved it. Her worth had turned into power, into respect, into legacy. She smiled softly, not out of pride alone but out of gratitude. The journey had come full circle. The girl once hidden in a corner was now the queen of the room. Nandi stood in the center of the hall, her gown glowing under the lights, her heart steady. The applause was still ringing in her ears, but she lifted her hand gently, and the room grew quiet. Every eye was on her now, not in mockery but in admiration. She took a deep breath and smiled, her voice calm but carrying through the silence. I want to thank someone very special, she began. My aunt. She is the one who stitched my first dress, the one many of you laughed at. That night, when I felt small and humiliated, she told me something I will never forget. Your worth isn't in clothes. Those words carried me when nothing else could. She paused, her eyes shining as she thought back to that painful evening. What most people didn't know was that the night of humiliation became the night of my turning point. If I had given up, if I had let the laughter bury me, there would be no Ankara queen today. That shame became my fire. The crowd was still, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Some shifted uncomfortably, remembering their own laughter. Others lowered their eyes. Finally, Nandi lifted her chin, her voice firm and clear. So let me say this to everyone here. Don't laugh at someone's beginning. You may be bowing to their success tomorrow. The words struck like thunder, sharp but true. For a moment, silence held the hall. Then slowly, applause began again, louder this time, rising into cheers, filling every corner of the room.